A Frenchman in the Gold Rush, translated from the Journal of Ernest de Massy. Arrival in San Francisco Bay. Tuesday, December 14th, 1849. After passing a bad night, at 8 in the morning, we again heard the cry, "Land." This time it was not a myth, but a reality. The weather had been perfect. Only about 10 hours from the coast, we were just passing the Farallones and heading for the harbor. But before we had time to get our bearings, fogs, rains, and squalls came down on us, veiling the coast from view. Forced to tack, we were afraid, nevertheless, of going on the reefs and rocks. Our situation is even more critical than it was yesterday, the wind being more violent. Had this lasted 2 hours longer, we might have had serious trouble. The Ceres might have gone down and all perished. But luckily at 2 o'clock, a rift in the clouds gave us a chance to head for a point that Captain Rare thought to be the entrance to the harbor. Just as we were making for this point, which all the sailors on board said was the right entrance, I overheard a conversation, carried on sub rosa between the two captains, which indicated clearly that Captain Ray was not certain of his bearings or of being on the course, that it was only a guess on his part, and that anything was preferable to going on the rocks for, if doomed to perish, it was better to die under full canvas. Notwithstanding, he has not given up hopes of making port safely, and in spite of such fears and premonitions, he is outwardly cool and collected. The seeming assurance with which he issues orders inspires confidence both in the crew and passengers. No one suspects the danger of our position. I have not breathed a word of what I overheard, and though I feel far from composed, yet I keep my worries to myself. I am prepared, however, for whatever may happen. But I take my hat off to Captain Ray, who throughout the voyage has acted like a first-class mariner. He is energetic, always ready, loyal, sympathetic, and far above his present position. While the owner has made him junior captain, yet he is ably qualified, owing to his long experience, to be senior officer. Under the present trying conditions, messmaker would probably have lost his head and his ship. The courage and cool-headedness of Ray has saved us all, and we cannot be too grateful to him. Though only 4:30, it is now nearly dark. We are passing through the narrow entrance, only 1½ kilometers wide, which opens into Golden Gate Harbor. On both sides of the entrance rise picturesque hills covered with pastures, where a few sheep, unguarded even by dog or shepherd, roam at random. On the right shore are discernible some stunted green oaks. On the distant mountains looming up far ahead of us are thousands of resiniferous trees forming great forests. Goat Island, the largest island in the bay, is not prepossessing in appearance, its vegetation being very scanty. A few scrawny trees on the northern end afford the sole shelter the goats, for many years the only inhabitants, could find. The smaller bird, Alcatraz Island, with its green summits, is well named, to judge by the flocks of feathered creatures who congregate here at sundown. Carrying light canvas, we came slowly down the bay, passing, off our port, the anchorage of the warships. Among them a French gunboat rode at anchor. Off starboard, about a mile away in a southerly direction, we could faintly make out the masts of the ships anchored below the village of San Francisco. Sudden squalls bearing down on us kept the breeze stiff and the seas rough enough to send us along at a merry pace toward our anchorage. Little by little the bay opened up before us, and across the forest of masts we caught a glimpse of the village with the emigrants' camps, pitched on the sloping hillsides, which overlook the bay, ocean, inlet, and the peninsula on which San Francisco rises. 2 years ago this spot was almost a wilderness. Now it is crowded with wooden and sheet iron houses of every kind, shape, and description, and with tents of every color forming an amphitheater, These house a population of adventurers, vagabonds, bankrupts, refugees from justice, merchants, deserting sailors, gamblers, and vagabonds who have no home or country. Interspersed among them are some honest men, workmen, and speculators who have come here from all over the world. This is what we see about 2 kilometers ahead of us, a great city in the making. Around us ride 300 ships or more which have arrived or are just arriving from all over the world. After unloading cargo, being unable to procure freight or sailors, they are forced to lie here idle through the winter season. Today, the 14th, at 5:30 p.m., the Ceres dropped anchor. It is now night, and the panorama stretching out before us is sparkling with lights for several kilometers, just as if every star in the heavens had been seized with the gold rush fever and had migrated to the coast of California. This evening, all these lights in the city, as well as those from the ships in the harbor, reflected in the waters of the bay, seem to have a supernatural and magical air about them. A welcome diversion after the trials and tribulations of the voyage. This evening, after finishing dinner, the officers of the Meuse, a ship from Havre which belongs to the firm owning the Ceres, came on board to greet us. As their ship has been lying here for 3 months, they are thoroughly familiar with local conditions. They told us many things which sounded so extraordinary that I was inclined not to believe them. A house, or rather a wooden shack in a good district, so I am told, rents for 3,500 piasters, Mexican dollars, 17,500 francs a year. Eggs are worth 40 francs, a bottle of wine, and what we have here is most mediocre, from 5 to 8 francs. Bread is 2 francs, 50 cents for a loaf weighing 14 ounces. Meat, the most reasonable commodity, as animals are plentiful in this country, brings from 90 cents to 1 franc. 20 cents a pound. Wood for a shack 28 by 11 feet is priced at 10,000 francs. Interest charges for money, securities, or mortgages are at the rate of 6% a month. A canoe sells for 2,000 francs. A visit from the doctor costs 1 ounce of gold dust or 80 francs. Wholesale prices are much lower. Retail prices would not be so inflated except for the heavy warehouse charges and the cost of labor and money. At the placers, given the right season and perfect health, the average amount of gold panned per day is said to be 1 ounce. However, supplies are more costly than in the city. The cost of moving 1 ton 20 leagues beyond here costs twice what it does to ship it from Havre to San Francisco. A good carpenter or merchant is paid, according to the local rates, from 50 to 80 francs a day. The smallest amount possible to live on per day, excluding wine, is 1 piastre. An axe selling for 2 francs, 50 cents in France, is sold for 15 francs in San Francisco. This seems too good to be true. New placers are opened up every day, gold being found in practically all the mountainous regions along most of the rivers. Evidences of it are seen on every hand. Purses are emptied and refilled as easily and with as much indifference as if these conditions would last forever. Often in less than 24 hours, gambling houses, cafes, and restaurants will absorb a large or small fortune some miner has spent months in accumulating. But yet he returns gaily to the mines, hoping to make another stake, which is always a gamble. Such is the picture the officers from the Meuse paint of this fabulous country we have just adopted, and I am reluctant to think they have been fabricating these tales just to play on our credulity. But now that we are actually here, tomorrow and the next few days will prove whether their information is correct or false. Right here I may say that if any of you are astonished at these statements I am giving, the joke is on you. If any palmist had prophesied this strange adventure of mine 25 months ago, I would have passed it off as absurd and advised him to consult a brain specialist. With all the Arabs and Moors you have over in Algeria, you ought not to lack astrologers. Some day, when you are looking for amusement, have one of them read your horoscope and predict the results of my sojourn here in this land of nuggets. These are the dates of the main events of the voyage. On my birthday, June 1st, we met an English ship, the Caroline, which, having run out of biscuits and water, was forced to get help from the Ceres. On July 25th, St. Christopher's Day, we stopped at Rio Janeiro. On August 28th, St. Augustine's Day, and the birthday of my brother Ormond, we rounded Cape Horn. On December 14, the birthday of my other brother, which fell on Wednesday, we reached San Francisco. A superstitious man might see something mysterious in these coincidences. To me, they seem odd. This is why I am mentioning them and pointing them out to you. Anchored off San Francisco, Saturday, December 15th, 1849. After dinner, the customs officials came on board and stationed one of their men on our ship. Finding that a French boat was leaving for shore, we took advantage of this opportunity to go over to the city. Local skippers charge from 1 to 2 piastres per person, the distance being about 2 kilometers. The rays of the setting sun lighting up the amphitheater on which the budding city, surrounded by underbrush and green pastures, stands, made an impressive picture as we were crossing. The present site could easily hold from 300 to 500,000 inhabitants, with ample chance for unlimited expansion southward. No doubt in due season, as wealth and commerce multiply, all the temporary wooden structures will be replaced by stone houses, hotels, palaces, and public monuments. When this happens, the panorama seen from the crest of Bird Island will be one of the most scenic in the world. But this will take at least half a century. There is a shortage of fresh water, however, and no one knows how or from where it can be brought into the city. At noon, the boat deposited us not on solid ground, but in the mud and slime which is everywhere. There is no quay, and only 1 or 2 landing places for the ships. The streets, which are amply broad, cut the city up into right angles. Close to 100 houses are being built a month, which are immediately rented. Scores of immigrants live in tents in the neighborhood, waiting for more comfortable quarters. Comparatively few houses are built of brick. The most imposing edifices are 2-story wooden structures painted in bright colors. Several are even elegant on the outside and luxurious within. But only millionaires are able to afford such luxury. All the business streets are teeming with activity. In fact, they seem as active as any in Lyons or Paris. Over here, however, the men seem more businesslike and in a greater hurry. Loafing is an unknown quantity. During the day, everyone plows knee-deep in mud through the lower streets, which get the heaviest travel, for this is where the banks, consignment houses, and the important commercial establishments are located. All are bent on acquiring business and social prestige regardless of their qualifications and trying to amass the fortune which always is just within reach, but invariably intangible and evasive. In the midst of this babel, you can distinguish the jargon of many languages. Ask a question in English, and your reply may be in German. If you speak in French, you may perhaps be answered in Spanish, Italian, Russian, Polish, or Chinese. This would be amusing if it were not such a handicap. However, those who can speak 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish, can make themselves understood anywhere. My first trip was to the post office for news from home. After having been deprived of this for more than 7 months, it is an unspeakable pleasure to get word from relatives, friends, and acquaintances. My trip was not in vain. I found a letter from you, my dear Adelstan, written from Saint Hippolyte and dated August 10th, one from Ormond, written on the 14th, and a third from my old friend Alphonse de Laboulage of June 14th, sent from Havre. In it, he mentions sending on some papers which have not reached me yet. The standing population of San Francisco is computed at approximately 50,000. This number is doubled if all the floating population living in tents, ships, and even in all-night gambling houses is added. These latter establishments, which invariably adjoin cafes, are surprisingly numerous and are popular as all-night resorts where patrons drink, gamble, and even go to sleep on the couches as the mood strikes them. Most of the cafés chantants employ an orchestra and singers. Croupiers even offer to their patrons, free of charge, anything they like in the way of food or drinks. This is done with an ulterior motive, and the trick is usually successful. Such a place is rented to a proprietor at the customary rate of $30,000 to $40,000 a year, who in turn sublets all the room he can dispose of at so much an hour. This new tenant, in accordance with his tastes and capital, establishes roulette, monte, 30 and 40, baccarat, etc., paying in proportion to the amount of space he uses, from $50 to $100 an evening, and acting as banker if he chooses. However, he must have at least $20,000 to $30,000 before even attempting to run a bank. The more piles of gold there are in evidence, the more the passion for play is excited. With this end in mind, a group of capitalists often form a company and pool their capital. Some of their members act as decoys to the inexperienced. Others keep an eye on the players who are apt to be numerous. It is a game where trickery and treachery are constantly pitted against inexperience and the gambling fever which seems inbred in human nature. This is how cliques assumed to be civilized make colossal fortunes and gain the whip hand. Though immoral and reprehensible, yet such is the case. At anchor off San Francisco, Sunday, December 16, 1849. Last evening, 14 of us hired a boat to take us off to sleep on the Ceres. But the sea was so rough, the night so black, and the currents so against us that the sailors who were rowing could not get beyond the Georges, a ship just out of Havre. The captain took us on board with generous hospitality and offered us supper, but, owing to a shortage of bunks, we had to spend the night dozing on chairs and benches. The sea is still running high today. This combination of winds and currents makes the ships strain and drag their anchors so badly that we saw several collisions. From here we could see the Ceres, several hundred feet away from the ship where we had taken refuge, struck violently by 3 large vessels and a section of her stern caved in. She also lost her bowsprit. We were obliged today to stay on the Georges until the sea calmed down along toward evening. Even then, it took us an hour and a half to make 600 meters in a boat manned by the best sailors of the Georges. Such was my first adventure on the soil of California. It augurs well for the future. At anchor off San Francisco, December 17, 1849. The bad weather still continues. After the Ceres had been so badly damaged by the English ship, the Morrison, the sailors were kept constantly on watch. The Georges has also her foremast, her main shrouds, and her 4 gallant top sails damaged. About 3 p.m., the weather abated sufficiently to allow her to pull away from these dangerous neighbors. Anchors were weighed, and she was allowed to drift several hundred meters. The damage to the Ceres is estimated at not less than 60,000 francs. Her hull and freight were not injured, but taking into consideration the difficulties involved and the high cost of repair work, she will probably be condemned and sold, some steps having already been taken to this effect. San Francisco Harbor, Tuesday, December 18. Last night was quiet for the first time since our arrival, and I was able to get some sleep and rest. Since early morning, I have been on shore trying to rent a site for a shack. I was fortunate enough to find some land centrally located near Montgomery and Sacramento streets. Though there were buildings on either side of the lot, yet there was a clear space measuring some 28 by 24 feet available for my building. The piece belongs to Robert Wells and Company, capitalists and speculators, who speak perfect French and, what is even rarer, are gentlemen. The price agreed on, $100, holds good until March 1st. I am paying it out at the rate of a little less than $50 a month. I also have the privilege of building my store up against one side of his house, an arrangement which saves me considerable lumber. I could not ask for a more suitable site at a better figure, considering the limited funds at my disposal. Later on in the day, I visited the French commission houses and some others which, for one reason or another, are rivals but which stand high among my fellow countrymen. One of them is run by J.J. Chauvetot, an ex-banker who had some severe reverses, but who managed to gather together some more capital, which he puts to many and often unscrupulous uses. He is suave, smooth-tongued, affable, and hypocritical toward anyone from whom he hopes to extract money, and haughty and cold toward others. He is always offering his services but never living up to his promises, and few admire or esteem him. In his place of business, while there is considerable talk of the dollar, it is rarely in evidence. It is my conviction, as well as that of many others, that his reputation for wealth and credit is largely fictitious. The firm of Hughes and Pioche. Hughes came out on the Ceres with us from Lima, acts as agent for our vessel. They run a large and flourishing business, make everyone welcome, and look after all business carefully. But I am not sure how substantial they are. Most of their capital is tied up in a building site located in the heart of the city, which has a wooden house on it. While their establishment looks prosperous, what assets are there behind it? I also called on Leon Bosaguije and Company. This name recalls the famous theft of the Queen's necklace years ago, in which one of his relatives, a jeweler, was the hero and victim. His father is well known in Paris, being head of a bookstore. Out here, the son runs a commission house for miscellaneous merchandise. He is a typical Parisian, a bon vivant, obliging and well-mannered, easy of approach, animated, light-hearted, and always making things pleasant for everyone around. He is the only man of affairs among my fellow countrymen who has the hallmark of a gentleman. The fourth and last, both as to rating and standing, is the firm of Mulot and Callot. Where have these rustic field mice come from, with their coarse manners and red noses, their cheap language, and their constant gesticulating over the sundry articles in their store, like so many angry men who believe they are accomplishing something, just because they are making a noise? I know nothing about them or their connections. If the saying, "As a man acts, so he is," holds good, one reveals the other. Callot began life as a strolling actor in Paris, playing minor roles in the Petit Lazare, a mediocre theater in the Latin Quarter. After a long apprenticeship, he passed on to the Varieties, where he played third and fourth-class roles. Finding his income inadequate both for his tastes and ambitions, he finally realized it would be wiser to abandon this irksome and impecunious calling. That is why he broke away from it. About this time, a daring diamond robbery had been perpetrated on a Mademoiselle Mars, a popular actress in Paris. For a long time, the papers were full of this audacious crime and how it had been accomplished. In some mysterious way, Callot came to be embroiled in this affair, either as a trusted employee in the house, an actor, an accomplice, or a fence for stolen articles. Anyway, He was so seriously compromised that he had to get out of the country immediately, and so left for America before further complications came up. To avoid all chance of being apprehended by the authorities, he put between himself and his accusers the whole width of the Atlantic, the American continent, and the Pacific Ocean, finally locating in the Hawaiian Islands. Out there, he heard of the gold discovery in California, and leaving the islands early in 1849, he started over to the new El Dorado with a cargo of local products. These he sold upon arriving for their weight in gold. Purchasing some land at Sacramento, he built a house, found a partner, and posed as a prosperous, honest, and reputable citizen. But he had not counted on the influx of French immigrants who recognized him, and who did not like his haughty manners. A few gossips exposed the story of his past, which was soon known all over Sacramento. Here you have the inside history of one of our most prominent French financiers in San Francisco. Our remaining compatriots are merchants and owners of cafes, cabarets, and restaurants, and do not bear close inspection, although I know very little about them. Of the restaurateurs, the best known are these two: Louis Berthy, from St. Louis, in the department of the Soure, Upper Saône, who is called Baltimore because he used to cook there, and who now runs the Baltimore Hotel, and a Mr. Mondelez who also owns a restaurant. Tomorrow I am going to tell you about our titled aristocracy. I have already met several typical ones. Wednesday, December 19, San Francisco Harbor. Among my compatriots, I would give the highest places to the Marquis of Franchelieu, who is connected with a family in Senlis, to Count Gaston de Roussay-Boulbon, a native of Avignon, and to Mr. de Bédoux, son of an ex-admiral and a passenger on the Ceres. All these, particularly the two former, are men of honor, courage, intrepidity, strength, and intelligence. Endowed with initiative, like so many others, they have been cast by the hazards of revolution, dreams of fortune, and ambition on the shores of California. While waiting for the time to be ripe to leave for the placers, they have been organizing hunting parties and selling their game at advantageous figures. They have also secured a boat and have started a ferry service back and forth across the bay from the ships to the shore carrying freight and passengers. While very fatiguing, this work is highly remunerative. I may be able to tell you more about them in the future. This is all I know for the time being. A far more dynamic, loquacious, and brazen type is the Marquis of Pindray. He is a weather-beaten man of fine build and regular features, muscles like iron, and the fascinating look of a bird of prey. He has all the earmarks of a strayed sheep of the aristocracy about him. Haughty, indifferent to human beings, the law, his own life, and that of his associates, he is a dangerous bully, always ready with his sword or pistols. Courageous even to recklessness, he is cold and cruel in his daily dealings. But he also knows how, when the mood moves him, to be insinuating, ingratiating, and sugar-coated if it will serve his interests, his greed, or his pleasures. He has a loud voice and a ready wit, and expresses himself correctly in Spanish, French, or English, more than he needs to stage his exploits. With all his traits and faults, he was born to be a popular demagogue, the general of an army, a great lord, or perhaps a bandit of the lowest order. It is this latter role that he elects to lead here when hunting. After a day passed in killing game, he will go to one of the ranchos belonging to a native Californian who is not too particular. Here he is made welcome for his charming manners and his ready conversation. After considerable eating and drinking, he will propose a game of monte, which is eagerly accepted, all the Californians and Mexicans having a passion for gambling. Close to daybreak, he returns to San Francisco in his boat, after winning from $100 to $400 from his host. Once in, he walks boastfully up and down the streets, deer horns hanging from his neck, rabbits, ducks, a revolver and a sword dangling from his belt, and a gun slung across his shoulder. He wears heavy boots, fawn-colored trousers, and a wide hat. Often he is followed by a dead bear, pulled on a handcart, victim of his prowess as a hunter. This wins him universal respect and admiration. He is greeted and congratulated on his valor, his luck, and his winnings. All this is followed by a round of dissipation, lasting several days and nights, in the popular restaurants and cafes with gay women, and in the gambling houses. Here it comes to an end, when he loses to a worse rascal than he is, what he had taken off the innocent ranchero. To be a ranchero is to be hunted as well. In the city he is usually accompanied, or rather followed, by two satellites or parasites who live off him by flattery and adulation. Men who are wholly depraved and vicious, whom this master of the fine art of filibustering treats like valets, using them in operations unworthy of his superior genius. These two brothers came from La Chapelle, petty lordlings of mysterious ancestry, who appear to have descended from the lowest rung of the social ladder. If the Marquis de Pendray creates a sensation in California as an eccentric character, what a scandalous past he must have had in France. According to reports circulated toward the end of the reign of Louis Philippe, a group of impecunious dandies were apprehended counterfeiting notes on the Bank of France. For some time the scheme worked smoothly, and the instigators led a circumspect life. But the police, warned by the repeated complaints of the victims of these bold speculations, and thoroughly aroused at last, scoured France from one end to the other, even carrying the search into foreign countries. In the end, the building, the presses, and all the accoutrements were discovered. Among this group was de Pendray. Several escaped, one of them being the Marquis, who, thanks to his Herculean strength and the fight he did not hesitate to put up, broke away from the police and so escaped prison and the court of assizes. The affair caused a furore. Some of the culprits were condemned to hard labor. De Pendray managed to escape paying the ultimate penalty. Meanwhile, he traveled under assumed names in various countries, trying to evade capture or possible extradition, which the government might have substituted, out of consideration, for his family standing. From then on to 1849, his nomadic life is a mystery. Early in that year, he learned of St. Joseph in the United States, a new village just being opened, where speculation in building sites was rampant. Lured by the news of gold in California, he came overland from there to San Francisco, believing that this melting pot of outcasts from everywhere would be a field worthy of future exploitation. Perhaps I shall have other opportunities to study this sinister character, but if I do not, I want to say, my dear Adelstan, that I think he is the same de Pendray whom you knew as a boy in Senlis from 1817 to 1823, as pensioner at the College of the Knights of St. Louis. What you have told me about the gloomy, moody, haughty, and rebellious character of that schoolmate coincides perfectly with his character as I have just described it to you. San Francisco Harbor, December 20, 1849. In accordance with arrangements I had previously made for an extra 15 days' board on the Ceres, Véron, Pidosset, and I have the right to remain on her, and have food and lodging for that period, without an extra drain on our purses. This enables me to make preliminary preparations without heavy expenditures. Notwithstanding, I have already spent one night in a tent where I slept on the ground. Even so, when fatigued after a long day, sleep comes readily. I have put Pidosset to cutting down some logs in the woods nearby and preparing the lumber needed to build our shack. This building will be used not only for a store, but also for sleeping quarters by putting in a platform a few feet off the ground, large enough to hold Véron, Pidocet, valet, his associate Blanc, Adolphe de Finance, Dr. Daing, and me. Dr. Daing will live with us free of charge through the rainy season. It is virtually conceded that in the spring we are to leave together for the placers and that we are to form a small company to go into anything that looks profitable. I should have liked to include Dr. Bryant in our association as well, but as he wanted half of our premises for his exclusive use, our restricted quarters made this out of the question. Here, for your edification, are the current quotations on staples in San Francisco. These prices were quoted to me this morning. Wine of the most ordinary quality, 1 piastre a bottle. Bread, half a piastre, or 2 francs. 50 cents for a 14-ounce loaf. 1 small bottle of whiskey, 1/4 of a piastre. Meat, average price, 1 franc. 15c. Onions and potatoes, 1 piastre per pound. A dozen small cabbages, 80 francs. 110 pounds of hog, 80 francs. Sugar, 3 francs, 75 cents per pound. Candles, 10 francs. Fresh eggs, 30 francs a dozen. Preserved, 15 francs. Milk, 5 francs a bottle. A pair of boots worth 15 francs in France costs 60 francs. One worth 20, 80 francs. Raincoats sell at 300 to 400 francs. Furniture and household goods are scarce and very high. Today I was offered a building 20 by 40 feet for 3,000 pasters. Spot cash, excluding the land. A few months ago, a certain businessman invested in a building lot in a good location, paying $4,000, on which he built a store with $2,000. Today he can clean up a net profit of $10,000 on the whole thing. San Francisco Harbor, December 21, 1849. Veron has been on shore only once. He is staying on the ship again tonight. I go ashore daily, often spending the night there, but it is not pleasant with only a tent for shelter. Pidocet is staying with 1 or 2 congenial passengers, whom I have assisted, while waiting for our building to be ready. I am architect and contractor, valet is supervisor, and Pidocet and Blanc are acting as workmen. Within a few days, it will be ready for occupancy. The lumber purchased at Peru has proved a first-class and economical investment and will be adequate. Here, $300 is the rate asked for 1,000 feet of lumber, which in France would be worth from 50 to 60 francs. My Peruvian dealings with Mr. Valet, however, have not proved so fortunate in other respects. The boat we purchased at half price was let down into the sea by the captain the day after we got into port, to clean the decks. This was done without my knowledge and permission, as the ship had not passed the customs formalities. As a result, this skiff, which I had counted on to transport my wares, was knocked to pieces in the same storm on the 15th and 16th that caused so much damage to the Ceres. Between you and me, the captain is legally responsible, but as it involves 1,500 to 2,000 francs, he will never pay, unless compelled to. Yet I am hoping to collect damages. Though we bought the boat largely on his recommendation, nevertheless, I have learned lately that he has been bragging of having advised the purchase to get freight, and that, in his opinion, the skiff was worthless to use around San Francisco. Of this none of us is convinced, but he will be made to suffer for this deception. Bad faith and stupidity ought to be properly punished. Let him laugh with his officers at our credulity and lack of knowledge in maritime matters. Some day he will find out he too has been duped, and that the joke is on him. San Francisco Harbor, Saturday, December 22, 1849. The present provisional capital of California, which has not as yet been admitted as one of the states, but is still a territory subject to the Governor-General, who resides at Washington, and which for this reason cannot make a constitution or enact legislation except for its individual cities, is the small town of San Jose. This town, which is south of here, is located about 10 kilometers in from the bay and about 50 kilometers from San Francisco. It is reached by land, or even more comfortably, by water. Its population is around 1,200. Under Mexican rule, it was the most northerly outpost in California. The only settlements beyond it were Santa Clara Mission, Mission San Jose, on the site of a hot spring, and Mission Dolores near San Francisco, which was then nothing but a hamlet or whaling station, where an occasional whaler came to trade hides and fresh meat for the products of his own country. The usual currency in such transactions was the hide of a cow or steer, which represented 1 piastre. Here and there, at intervals of 6 leagues or so, are located ranchos. Most of the rancheros are born musicians. For servants, they have Indians. Usually, they own many square leagues of land around their houses. On these lands graze millions of heads of cattle, sheep, and horses. Sometime I may be able to give you a more detailed description of this variety of the human species, a cross between a pure-blooded savage and civilized man. The preceding is merely a resume of conversations I have had with various acquaintances who have already been over the country. While I am waiting for business to pick up, I wander around, ask questions, and keep my eyes and ears open. San Francisco Harbor, Sunday, December 23, 1849. I understand that nuggets of gold weighing from 20 to 40 pounds are sometimes found. This may be so, but up to the present the heaviest I have seen with my own eyes and touched with my own hands weighed 40 ounces. It was artistically marked by the pickaxes and looked like a tiny piece of metal cast in a piece of rock. Gold dust, commonly used in commercial transactions, does not seem so much like heavy or fine sand as it does like coarse bran. In color, it is closer to a dull yellow-brown than to a natural gold. 1 ounce passes for $16, somewhat less than its actual value. Add to this the fact that the merchant's scales are not always accurate, and you can readily see how the miner is frequently, if not invariably, shortchanged. Often, to counterbalance this, he attempts to doctor his gold dust or clean it badly, but the trader is always on the lookout for such gold and will not pay full price for any that looks black or too heavy. Usually only half price is offered to anyone who tries to fool them. Today, the customs officials confiscated the Ceres for carrying contraband on the grounds that foreign vessels plying on the Pacific coast have no right to take on merchandise at intermediate ports of call. The Ceres, having taken on freight at Lima, had violated this agreement, and so was seized. 75 other ships, among them 2 French vessels which are lying here in port, are victims of this same fate. The captain's agents and the consul are protesting vigorously, but the omnipotent head collector of customs is obdurate. Each side claims to be in the right, and the affair threatens to take on the aspect of an international disagreement. I am informed that a ship can only carry goods from her home port, as authorized by owner and captain, who are held responsible for any infringement of this regulation. But in a country like this, where loyalty is an unknown factor, and where the wheels of justice grind slowly, legal costs are apt to exceed the value of what is in litigation. And so, before filling the attorney's pockets, it is well to know what you are doing. If our own goods are confiscated, our only redress will come from Joseph Lemaitre, owner and captain messmaker. This episode is the beginning of trials and tribulations for those fine gentlemen, and whatever the penalty may be, there will be few, if any, of the passengers, whom they have exploited for 7 long months, who will say a good word for them. San Francisco Bay, December 24, 1849. Out here, no one is ashamed of what he is doing, no matter how humble it may be. From day to day, I see fine fellows from Paris, London, and New York carrying heavy trunks on their backs for persons whom, a year ago, they would not even have had as servants. Lawyers, doctors, capitalists, and merchants who have no clientele, consultations, legal matters to attend to, or adequate credit, are forced, if they would eat or speculate, to black boots at the door of a restaurant or popular cafe, cook or wash dishes. At such tasks, they can earn from 20 to 50 francs a day. On this, they can live in moderate comfort if they are economical and industrious. Another business consists in going out and cutting wood in the little forest on the outskirts of the village, which seems to have no owner and not to be under the supervision of any forest ranger. Here, anyone knowing how to handle a hatchet and saw can cut down about 5 loads of wood a day. This is sold in the city at the rate of $1 a load. While I admit it is fatiguing, yet the freedom of this life is ample compensation. What will become of all our good friends of the Ceres in this letting down of all social restraints and barriers? What if their plans miscarry? I have already seen several of them looking worn and worried. Men of intelligence eventually come to realize that the strong arm of the worker, plus the brains of the businessman and capitalist united with order and economy, are the basis of future prosperity in this new country. That motto of the National Workers of Paris, all for the Union, is interpreted out here as everyone for himself. Pepin, who won a first prize given by the University of Paris for excellence as a plasterer, together with Vicomte Jules de France, who says he is descended from Robert the Brave, are planning to put on a skit with an actor from the varieties called Jourdain, who came out on the Edouard, and who, in the interim, has gambled away his last piastre and is piling up bills at the hotels. Dr. Briot, assisted by Blondeau, son of a deputy from Doubs, Boyon, son of a manufacturer, Pepiquignot, called Grésily and Parisot, ancestry unknown, are attempting to manufacture lemonade and sell it at a fabulous figure. Théologne, who comes from a line of Oriental scholars and who recently served as secretary to ex-minister Montalivet, is peddling oranges, cigars, matches, and other sundries. With him is Fichot, once popular at Parisian social functions, who is now waiting for something to turn up. De la Molaire, an ex-cavalry officer, has organized a company to do joiner's work. De Bedoux, whose father is an active, not a retired admiral, together with several friends has purchased a boat and is making trips around the bay and plying between the far side and Contra Costa, a wooded plain as yet comparatively undeveloped. Charbonnel, the unfortunate manufacturer, together with several workers from the ships, one of them is Bourret of the Parisian firm of Rosa, Bourret & Co., publishers of Spanish books, is once more attempting to make the fortune that has so often evaded him. Guilaucus Paré readily accepted work as a cook, though he seems ambitious. The flighty Estelle has found an easy berth. Women being at a premium, she accepted a place as chambermaid at the home of the bachelor Léon Bossange, with large wages paid in advance. The group of immigrants known as the Nationalists, organized and directed by a man named Blanchot in Paris, are camping over on the hill. They have no supplies, capital, credit, or friends of influence. In the meanwhile, the Home Office keeps the money of these simpletons, who left home and country on the strength of idle promises. This Blanchot must be an infamous aristocrat. No plebeian would conduct himself so outrageously. The 17 remaining members of the Society of 32 are living frugally on what little they have left, while trying to find some occupation. So far, they have been unsuccessful due to the constant rains we are now having. The firm of Massy, Véron and Company is still intact, despite the attempt made to stir up discord. As soon as our shack is completed, possibly tomorrow, We will make it our headquarters together with those to whom we are offering hospitality. We all mean business with the single exception of Blanc, the slave dealer and nephew of Baron Blanc, an extremely rich aristocrat from Savoyard, who is unloading his merchandise and is trying to sell it between now and March 1st. When this is accomplished, he hopes to go into something else. As my time will be pretty well taken up with business, my daily journal will have to suffer for the time being. That is why I am bringing the third section to a close and sending it on to my brother, friends, and relatives who may be interested in knowing what I am doing. Part 4. To my cousin Charles de Finance. A winter spent in San Francisco in the year 1850. San Francisco, California, February 1st, 1850. Courage, ambition, and energy are not enough, my dear friend, to carry one on to his goal. Luck must also be with you. In this, at least for the time being, I have been unfortunate. On January 1st, my shack was completed on the site of that great and growing cosmopolitan city called San Francisco. There I installed myself with my associate Véron, my workman Paidosset, and 2 other passengers from the Ceres, co-owners of the shack. We also offered hospitality to your relative Adolphe de Finance and to Dr. Dying, who accepted. We unpacked our trunks and several small cases of merchandise and provisions, which had come through the customs, who very considerately passed them without inspection. As for the main bulk of my wares shipped out as freight, that is another story. We had to lose over 8 days and make trip after trip through the mud and rain looking after them. When you believe everything is perfectly legal, then they refuse to pass your goods through. Due to the omission of some formality, the head customs officials had neglected to point out. The inspector of customs here is a colonel. James Collier, a heavy-set busybody, who by nature, or possibly from motives of personal interest, stands in with the assistants and agents who unite to squander money and discourage the importation of foreign merchandise. Those who know American and international law are convinced he is overstepping his legal rights. It must be very expensive for the United States to have so rapacious a rascal at the head of the local customs. Meeting with little success at the hands of the agent, a dyed-in-the-wool Yankee who seemed to want to make me dance, I went to another agent who came of French parentage, but was an American from New Orleans. He was well-mannered and spoke perfect French. Being what the Yankees call a very smart gentleman, he knew how to handle my matters. My gravest obstacle was to provide proper security for the paying of duty on the goods I had left in the customs house, as I did not have funds enough to take them all out at the same time. Their way of putting up a bond confused me, as no one had told me how to arrange it. In my ignorance and lack of knowledge, I should never have been able to procure proper security. My new friend, Mr. de Peru, to whom I had made my position clear, told me that, for the sum of $2, he would arrange it. He found proper backing and relieved me of all responsibility. Having thus fulfilled all requirements, I was permitted to take out what I thought I could sell, together with samples of what remained. It was a relief when the trouble was over, as I was growing gray-headed and losing my appetite over it. Much of my capital has gone into the coffers of the customs officials and the unavoidable incidentals arising out of the customs. As this must be built up again, we shall have to sell everything we possibly can, even down to our personal belongings. Of what use are overcoats, heavy coats, and riding coats, when a woolen shirt and a jacket will meet all requirements arising out of our present mode of living? A mode which, both physically and morally, is on a low level, without family, friends, or even pleasant acquaintances, without wives, or the comforts of home, and surrounded by hotels, gambling houses, and cafés chantants. Whenever we meet a man of fine appearance, He is apt to be a banker in a gambling den, a croupier, an accomplice, or a swindler. Now and again, happy miners are seen, men who have burned their bridges behind them and are returning to their own country by the first outbound steamer. I spend my days mainly at the store, waiting for customers. I have enough spare time to separate my 36% brandy and make kirsch and cognac, bottle them, and box them for the convenience of patrons. The bottles and cases cost nothing. All we have to do is to go out and gather them up off the main streets where they are thrown as a way of getting rid of useless and cumbersome articles, take them in, wash them, and pack them. This is Pitoset's task, in addition to collecting fuel. Every morning he makes the rounds, bringing in cases, bottles, and enough wood to carry us through the day. To me falls the duty of transacting any business in the city, as no one else understands a word of English. What little I know is a great help in getting around. Veron has taken over the culinary department, keeping it, as well as the establishment, tidy. To cook our food, we improvised an oven out of earth where we prepare our daily repasts. Valet, Blanc, de Finance, the doctor, my 2 associates and myself, as best we can. When the oven is not being used, it serves as a place for carrying on my occupation of brandy making. Our food costs us very little. We have 100 kilograms of lard and bacon on hand, 300 liters of wine, tea and coffee, sugar, vinegar, and olive oil. So all we need to buy is meat or bread occasionally. In the evenings, we lay in a supply of trinkets, cutlery, haberdashery, matches, and sundries, close-up shop, and go over to the gambling dens and cafés chantants, which are crowded with patrons. There we try to sell our wares at exorbitant prices. In this way, I have even sold matches worth 10 centimes a box in France for 2 francs and a half. Recent comers sell off whatever they do not want to take on to the mines as soon as possible. And in these establishments, there are often more sellers than buyers. It is a strange spectacle to see the tense, animated faces, to hear the babble of foreign tongues, and watch the different races and the strange costumes. It is all like pandemonium let loose, a fair or an exchange, as well as the gathering place of gamblers, high livers and heavy drinkers, sharpers, knaves, rich men, and now and again, an honest citizen. Often, to break the monotony, a fight starts. Swords and revolvers are flashed. A pickpocket is caught and arrested, or a ruined gambler commits suicide. Even after some such dramatic moment, things soon become normal. The orchestra plays its liveliest polka. The singers air their most lurid songs, accompanied by suggestive poses, while the voice of the croupier is heard calling out at regular intervals his usual refrain. "Place your money, gentlemen. The play is about to start." Anyone just coming in would never believe that only a moment before this blasé crowd had witnessed a tragedy, and that one of their members had just been carried out, dead or dying from the center of this gay crowd, to the police station or the office of the coroner. In addition to studying these eccentric customs, the most important result of our evening's trips to these haunts of vice is the sale of from 15 to 20 francs worth of miscellaneous merchandise, about 2/3 of which is net profit. Around midnight, we return to our shack, where our companions in misfortune, who have been left to guard our establishment, are already lost in slumber. Morning finds the 7 of us on the platform 2.5 meters off the floor, each on his mattress, speculating on the past, present, and future, but without coming to any definite conclusions. Langlet, who is 26, prefers loafing to hard work with no pay. After he had been with us a few days, he decided to take over a cabaret with Widow Perrette, aged 46, who has a supply of watches and a little money. Now he plans to marry her. I do not know whether he is joking or serious. The object of his choice has improved since landing. Her complexion, whether by art or nature, has taken on more color. By the side of her plump, pink-cheeked husband, what a fine appearance this old crow with her scarred face, her wrinkles, and her toothlessness will make. How long will peace and harmony reign between them, I wonder? I am looking up several addresses I brought along from Paris of friends who are supposed to be living here in California. First there is Mr. Langlois, who is the brother of the director of the post at Havre, where my friend Alphonse de Laboulage is assistant inspector. I have heard that this gentleman, who held a very fine position, was taken seriously ill at the village of San Jose, that his business became entangled, and his fortune heavily mortgaged. Apparently his brother at Havre knew nothing about it. I am also going to see Dr. Chevalier, son of a highly respected citizen whose place of business is in La Place de la Loge at Langres, when I can find out where he is living. Some say he has gone to the mines, others that he is living at Mazatlan, Mexico, and practicing his profession. The last one is Mr. Preleur of Franche-Comté, of whom I have not been able to find any trace. Taking my letter of recommendation from Mr. Buffett, I went to see Mr. Guy, our consular agent. Unfortunately, he is head of a colony of immigrants and more interested in his own private affairs than those of the consulate. He barely read my letter, a very gracious and explicit one from the minister who had written him personally at the solicitation of our mutual friend, Edward Cornol of Langres, assistant prefect at Mirecourt, then dismissed me courteously but with finality. I am now quite convinced that I am absolutely alone out here and must rely on my own initiative. What a curious thing confidence is. It gives energy, pride, and spirit. Otherwise, I might readily lose all initiative and be entirely dependent on others. This is my situation as I am about to make my debut in California. It is now up to me to use my own judgment. On December 24th, a fire completely destroyed one of our streets. All the wooden houses burned down like so many matches. If this happens in the rainy season, what must happen in summer when, for 8 months, no rain falls, and the strong winds blow daily from 8 in the morning to 5 in the evening? The outlook is far from reassuring for the proprietors of all these little shops, so poorly constructed, and yet so costly and combustible. But one calamity, more or less, seems to make no difference to these Californians. Far from seeming discouraged, their faces do not even show the slightest emotion when they see their houses and wares reduced to ashes. Barely are the embers cold before they begin rebuilding. How and where do they get credit when nothing is left out of the ruins? What goods are saved often have to go to the creditors, and goods are usually only on consignment. The loss probably has to be borne by the owners abroad, while those who were burned out often find themselves better off than before. But despite these risks, there will be no way of safeguarding property until the city is built of brick and stone, a matter of many more years. The day after the disaster, a group of workmen cleared off the debris and rubbish, and new houses of the usual wooden type soon sprang up as if by magic. Within 10 days, no one would have ever known a fire had been there. The amusing romance, which began on board the Ceres between Lieutenant Simon and Estelle, has been revived again in as odd a manner as it began. Léon Bossange having made some proposals to the woman, which did not pass by unheeded. Simon grew mad with jealousy, and tried by a coup d'état to win back his fickle companion by promising to marry her. Estelle accepted the proposal, and 48 hours later became Mrs. Simon in the eyes of God and the law. 15 days later, she accepted a position as actress in a local theater. As an ingénue, I have no doubt. Then she got a divorce and returned to Bossonge, whom she found more amiable and less brutal. This poor, strolling actress, mistress, and heartless woman has chosen her path in life: the theater, the street, and the alcove. This she may be able to follow for many years to come, for the stores carry chiffons, wigs, and curls, the dentist's teeth, and the perfumer's rouge to replace what is missing. But what will be the ultimate outcome? The Californians, however, have not yet reached the point of being overly particular. While all this has been going on, Adolphe de Finance and Dr. Dying have been visiting down in San Jose, the provisional capital. There they got into touch with Mr. Langlois, who welcomed them most cordially because of the message I sent from his brother at Havre. He gave them all the information they asked for, but he can be of very little use to them, owing to his present depleted financial situation through poor investments, and the paralysis from which he is a constant sufferer, and which may, at any time, prove fatal. There is no activity in the capital other than commerce and agriculture. Most of the population consists of Californians, Mexicans, Chileans, and half-savage Indians. Spanish is the predominating language, and the principal business transactions are carried out in that tongue. As their tastes and habits differ materially from those of the Americans and Northern Europeans, what would readily sell in San Francisco would not be marketable in this village. They also met a Frenchman of Besançon and an acquaintance of Dr. Briot by the name of Jourdain, who runs a local hotel and restaurant. He had been in Mexico on some personal matters, where he came to know a man called Joseph Limantour, who claimed he was grantee, by an act of the Mexican government prior to the annexation of California, of a large section of land, on a portion of which San Francisco is now located. Jourdain is making his home at San Jose, where he is supposedly representing the rights and interests, true or fictitious, of Mr. Limantour, whose property will soon become immensely valuable. More than likely, he is making his money out of the kind of gold mining indulged in by judges and lawyers out here who command exorbitant prices. Since our arrival, 3 of the former passengers on the Ceres have passed away. The first to go was Theodora Schultz, the young German consumptive, who rallied slightly during the last months of the voyage, but who could neither live nor die. The second is Bois de la Tour, of whom I know practically nothing, as there was little about him, no salient trait or characteristic, to make him stand out from his fellow passengers. The third is Gosselin, the former owner of a café at Havre, and a friend of de France and La Molaire, a noisy, awkward, heavy-set fellow who would be more at home in the steerage than the salon. While acting as waiter in a café, he fell a victim to his own greed and intemperance, his desire to live his youth over again, and while intoxicated, fell down the stairs, broke his neck, and after 15 days' suffering, died in an attic infested with worms and vermin. De France has tried to launch a newspaper, buying an autographic press from Dr. Briot for the purpose, and after purchasing some paper on credit, published 1 edition. It failed to sell, however, yet a few debts more or less mean nothing to this gentleman. He suspended publication for 15 days, then found a new moneylender, but his second venture proved no more successful. All this, nevertheless, fails to dampen his enthusiasm. He has about 100 different schemes in his head, all more or less visionary, for living in luxury at the expense of any simpleton who comes along. The only things he expects to pay with are promises, flattery, or insinuating remarks. This is a currency, he is clever enough to know, that never depreciates wherever it is used carefully. New ships are entering the harbor daily. They come from all over the world and are loaded down with freight and passengers. Usually, they are unable to leave immediately once they have entered, for the crews, as a general thing, desert and no freight is obtainable. As a result, San Francisco presents to the eye the appearance of a magnificent forest of masts, from which float the many colors of various maritime nations. One of the latest arrivals is the cachalot of Havre, Captain Legrand. The passengers on this vessel are so dissatisfied that they have taken vengeance for their bad treatment by denouncing the cargo as contraband. This is bringing on legal proceedings which will force the owner to pay a heavy fine and probably cause the ship to be confiscated. Everyone is laughing about the way Messmaker and Legrand are being punished in the same manner, and how they are condoling with each other. The Succès, a ship from Bordeaux, has just pulled into port. Among the passengers on board is Oscar de Gaulne, who is bringing in some valuable merchandise. Several years ago, I met him at the home of Mr. de U of La Rochère, and later he called on me at Passavant. His father is a wealthy ship owner at Bordeaux, and an old friend of Mrs. de U, the daughter of the Count de Grivel of Périgny. At the time, he impressed me as being a foolish, weak character, a bon vivant, and rather forward. At that time, I was told he was not on good terms with his father, who was avaricious, egotistical, and wedded to business, not pleasure. The old gentleman watched his son's foolish expenditures regretfully, and though he gave him a generous allowance, he refused to loosen his purse strings for promiscuous expenditures. So I surmise the little scapegrace has left Bordeaux, Franche-Comté, where he was neither wanted nor needed, concluding to put an end to all paternal remonstrances and the annoyance of pressing creditors. My first impression of him here in San Francisco was that he had not changed, but after several meetings he told me his history with such frankness and such seriousness that I thought he had improved considerably. He told me his goods had cost him nearly 80,000 francs, that he intended to sell them off and open up a branch of his father's house in San Francisco, that he planned to represent several large houses in Bordeaux, and that every incoming ship was bringing him fresh merchandise. He also told me Mr. Chauvetot was very close about money matters, and that he had had some excellent offers to go into business. While not wholly convinced yet, I was somewhat impressed by his conversation. But if he already has a desk in the office of his future partner, who has come to an agreement with him, why is he living in idleness and spending the evenings at roulette, haughtily throwing a dollar on the red and black like an amateur for whom the dollar has no value, and then posing as a man of affairs before everyone who might be interested in studying and knowing him? Between you and me, this young man de Gaulne has changed very little. His youthful traits still seem to predominate over those of his maturer years. If I digress at some length to discuss this young man, who would perhaps otherwise pass by unnoticed, it is because in my present isolated situation, anyone whose family, social standing, or education makes him stand out from the crowd, or whom I knew, arouses a feeling of affection in me, which draws me to him and gives a sense of confidence and almost of friendship, however superficial or notoriously eccentric the person be. This is all I have to say about him for the time being, but without a doubt I shall have occasion to speak of him again later. Every Sunday is a holiday out here. The shops close, and wherever one is open, you may be sure it is run by a Frenchman. We ourselves profit by this day of rest to take short trips in the neighborhood. Occasionally, Veron and Blanc go out hunting and bring in some birds, duck or quail, which serve to vary our usual monotonous diet. On one of our walks, our goal was the Presidio, which lies some 6 kilometers beyond here, near the entrance to Golden Gate Harbor. Long ago, this was a mission, but the few buildings which now remain serve as barracks for the 100 artillerymen who have charge of 20 dilapidated cannon and who represent the sole force available here to defend the rights of the Americans in California. The route, a well-traveled road leading to the Presidio, was sandy, rough and uneven, though passable for vehicles. We frequently passed small green valleys where little brooks, which dry up in summer, wind in and out in winter. We also passed knolls covered with shrubs, green oaks, and wild roses. Near the sea were several lakes of fresh water. A few wooden houses were seen set back in the center of enclosures, which in the springtime become gardens. In the fields, steers, cows, and horses roamed at random. Such is the back country of San Francisco. The entrance to the harbor lies on the right, with the lagoons opposite. On the left is the mission, or rather barracks. The mainland comes close to being an island. It is about 100 kilometers in length and is surrounded by the ocean and the bay. The Presidio lies in its most northerly extremity. At its southern apex is Santa Clara Mission. A chain of mountains parallels the coast, running from north to south. These are broken up near San Rafael, which lies in a peninsula or a cove. A geologist would say these ranges had not always been in existence, and that, sometime in the past, the Great Bay of San Francisco spread over all the low country, as far as San Jose on the south, east as far as Monte Diablo, covering the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, and forming an inland sea more than 100 leagues in diameter. In some prehistoric upheaval, the rivers came into existence, while the general character of the land underwent a complete metamorphosis. Mr. de Blangy, whom I have not met as yet, but whose address has been found, will probably start for France at once to receive the inheritance left him by his father, some 300,000 francs or more, which he expected to have sent out to him here. I shall take this opportunity to send you some letters, papers, and other items of minor interest. Among these I am sending the reply I got from Mr. Langlois in San Josean, to a letter which I sent him enclosing one from his brother who is in the post office at Havre. In it you will find considerable information about the country, written by a man who has made his home here for a number of years. You can send it on to his brother, as it may be the last time he will ever hear from him, for he is slowly dying. His last days have been spent in untangling legal problems between the captain of the Georges and its owner Mr. Lamoise on the one hand, and the ship's passengers on the other. The owner at Havre has been sentenced to pay a fine of $100, with interest, as damages to each passenger. This makes a pretty penny for him to pay, as there are from 80 to 100 passengers in all. Why could not the other passengers, who have equal grounds for complaint against their captain, profit by this lesson? Those on the Ceres could easily claim redress, and if this were done often enough by passengers, it might be of value to future travelers. My fellow passenger, Deschenais from Langres, is not finding San Francisco a bed of roses any more than the rest of us. He accepts whatever he is offered. Something seems wrong with him. For one thing, he is quite upset over not hearing from his wife, who is the only soul in France who knows where he is, although outwardly she pretends to know nothing of him. He will be agreeably surprised to hear of the inheritance that has just come to him, and of which I have been instructed to inform him. He may not be as happy, however, to hear that he has recently become a father, for this is a situation in which he can claim no rightful part. This new arrival at Ceres seems to explain why his wife has been so silent. Nobody is perfect. The wife of this poor fellow is just another instance of what is found everywhere. I have not been lucky in my choice of acolytes for my commercial dealings. Alexander is energetic enough, but he spends most of his time doing things that are useless, and the slightest remonstrance exasperates him. Pidocet has no initiative. He is as helpless as an infant and requires constant supervision. When business takes me into the city, I have to close up shop as I cannot be everywhere at the same time. Nor do I see any way out of this unpleasant situation, but to put up with it and take the consequences. We are having alternate spells of good and bad weather. These often last 3 days at a stretch. When the weather is clear, we get a crisp frost in the morning, but by the middle of the day the sun is hot. The rains frequently come down in torrents, and even when the wind is not blowing, we have to sit idly indoors, musing over our past, thinking about the present, and dreaming vain dreams of the future. As last Saturday was a glorious day, we walked over to Mission Dolores, which lies about 5 kilometers south of San Francisco. It will not be long before all the intermediate country will be a part of the city proper. Even now the woods and fields are being cut up into lots, which range in size from 1/2 to 1/4 of a hectare, for speculative purposes. The trees in the woods through which we passed were not large. Frequently they were gnarled and bent by the steady winds which sweep over them. The leaves were still clinging to them, winter differing from summer out here only by the slight variation in color of the foliage. The country beyond the forest was cut up into little hills and valleys. In the latter stood small pools of water, the rendezvous of great croaking frogs, 4 times the size of ours in France. They are not often found here, for these little waterways and ponds dry up in the summer season. Here and there in the meadows grew mushrooms of a pinkish color. Finally, after an hour's walking, we reached the site of the old mission, 50 years ago at the zenith of its prosperity, with its rich and cultivated fields, its livestock, and its fruit orchards, but now abandoned, neglected, and almost in ruins. When the War of Independence was over, the Mexicans confiscated the missions and dismissed the Franciscan fathers on the grounds that they were implicated in politics in Madrid. In reality, this was only a pretext to seize their immense herds of sheep and cattle. The many Indians whom they had partially civilized and who lived nearby tilling the mission lands, no longer having a guiding hand over them, returned to their state of savagery. The lands were left idle, the properties fell into ruins, and the buildings crumbled from lack of attention. These despoilers, in the main Mexicans, being soon replaced by the victorious Americans, were unable long to enjoy the fruits of their plunder. The immense herds that were confiscated, the most tangible assets of this unjust procedure, soon died from exposure in the rainy season, while agile outlaws of many nationalities did not hesitate to shoot them down and sell the hides under the very eyes of the local police, who were incapable of suppressing this petty thievery. In connection with Mission San Francisco, Dolores, there is a dilapidated chapel or shelter that is notable mainly for its 3 crumbling adobe pillars supporting the pediment which adorns the facade. This is now occupied by a Mexican priest and a French vicar from the Diocese of Paris, who are connected with the Association of Foreign Missions. The curé is devoted to the church, as it was the former residence of the Franciscan fathers. I went inside and chatted for a time with the vicar. From him I learned that a suit is now pending between the California missions and the United States government relative to the properties that are still in the hands of the Catholic Church. A suit they have slight chance of winning, since the decision rests with the United States court. About 120 persons live around the mission. Most of them are Mexicans, Indians, or half-breeds. Europeans and Americans are in the minority. There is no business activity here beyond the raising of garden produce, which brings in quick returns. Everything else is at a standstill. An alcalde, a combination of mayor and justice of the peace found in Spanish countries, is the sole person in authority. A little brook, green with watercress, ran through a field where narcissus and violets grew up around the houses. From idle curiosity and as a concession to our future role of gold diggers, we attempted to wash some sand dug out of the brook. While the attempt was harmless enough, yet it was fruitless. for we found only a few glistening grains of yellow mica. On this trip, I had a chance to talk with an Indian who spoke French as brokenly as I did Spanish. He offered to act as my servant, saying he could garden, lasso horses and wild cattle, and tame them all for the sum of $30 a month. He also told me that a good horse could be bought for $60. This is not dear in comparison with other prices. On the other hand, some lands near the mission, and capable of being cultivated, some 50 acres in all, have just been rented for the unprecedented amount of 4,500 francs a year by the alcalde at the mission. After this pleasant day spent out in the open under a radiant sun such as we have in France during May, we returned in the late afternoon to our dwelling ready again to resume our life of drudgery and to mark time in the deadly mire of San Francisco. Most of our passengers on the trip out who are living here have been ill in one way or another, mainly with fever and dysentery. The change in climate, food, and occupation, camping out in the rainy season, intemperate living, and the unhealthy conditions of the streets. 20,000 citizens throw their refuse out into the mud and slime to decompose, are quite enough to make serious inroads on the constitutions of even the strongest. Our own small group has been fairly immune, thanks to the hygienic way in which we live, to the medicine we take, and to our diet, chiefly of rice. No one has been seriously ill. Today is the 15th of February, 1850. Just 2 months ago, I first put foot on this promised land of California, which in these 2 long months has failed to fulfill any of its promises. These have been trying months both for body and soul. In the main, they have been spent in searching, though ineffectually, for my dream castles in Spain. All my hopes and my resources, as well as those of others entrusted to my care, are fast disappearing. My hair has grown quite gray, a thing which makes a young and energetic man appear ridiculous. On the long voyage out, however, I turned this whole situation over in my mind and was prepared to struggle. And struggle I will. I have just written Armand to sell everything I own and liquidate my French securities. I can now see that I may have to stay here longer than I had expected. Who knows from the way things are now going when I shall ever return, for I will never come back unless I can make a success of this undertaking. San Francisco, March 15th, 1850. I spent the last fortnight in February auctioning off all the merchandise I could sell at retail before March 1st, when the ground lease on the site where I built my shack expires. This method of liquidation is always disastrous. We also sold off whatever personal belongings we no longer needed to the miners, who are always our best customers. I first planned to store away most of our things in trunks and leave them behind until we got back from the placers. But our urgent need of money, the fear of fire, and the cost of holding them made me change my mind. I left with the customs all our tools and about 900 liters of kirsch, at present unsaleable. I still have 8 months to get them out again, and many things can easily happen in the interim. The lumber in our buildings was sold off for $65, and the proceeds divided between Mr. Valle and our company. Mr. Valle and Dr. Dang have just left on a barge for Yuba. They ran into some very heavy weather. News from the placers on this river is decidedly encouraging, but then, as you know, bad news never leaks out. Recently, I have struck up a friendship with the young Abbé Dubé, whose home was originally on the coast near Ceres, Upper Saône. He is a fine fellow and a typical ecclesiastic. I cannot imagine why he has come out to this remote and wild country. Apparently his goal is to establish a parish at San Rafael, a budding settlement 7 leagues from here on the far side of the bay. But where will he get his parish owners from? The tide of immigration will not flow over across the bay while the mining fever lasts. If he could only find some devout, rich, and generous miner who would support his church. This, no doubt, would satisfy, for the time being, his ambition, his zeal, and his frail health. He has the air of a poor but honest man. I have sold him some goods outright, and have given him some more on consignment, which he will sell and credit to my account, such as rosaries, medals, and images. With the profits, there ought to be enough to buy a building site in the growing section of the city, on which we could pitch a tent by way of indicating that we are about to take possession. I furnished him with enough cloth for this purpose. We have been given a building lot in the projected Stanislaus city, which carries a clause with it making the donation null and void if we have not put a $600 building on it within 6 months. I accepted it, as I was not committed to anything. The property is 240 by 80 feet and faces on 3 streets. We have bought another lot near San Jose measuring 100 by 100 feet. It is unrestricted and cost $36. Every day, hundreds of lots in new subdivisions which exist only on paper are sold off at auction. In this way, fortunes are both lost and gained. It is all a lottery. But this is the way a number of cities, many of them now quite prosperous, sprang into existence. At places like Sacramento City, Marysville, Eliza City, the 2 latter being named for Captain Sutter's daughters, who owned the land on which they were laid out. Stockton and Joaquin City, the shrewd capitalists who bought up lots at the opening, have since realized enormous profits. Today, reckless speculation is going on in San Francisco, down by the waterfront along Montgomery Street, which is so near the bay that the water comes up all around the last houses on the east side of the street. Furthermore, a plot of the city shows these lots to extend for 300 meters into the bay. Every day, building lots are sold, which, at high tide, are from 1 to 3 meters underwater and at a price from $50 to $100, according to size and location. And the purchaser thinks he has made a fine purchase. But he will find he needs several well-filled pocketbooks in addition to his initial purchase. One for the pile work, one to fill in his land with dirt, and one to pay his construction costs. In all, a total of from $10,000 to $20,000 will have to be invested in less than 2 years, and this if he has no fires. On the west shore of the bay, located on a steep mountain which overlooks the city, are some mounds of shifting sands which are difficult even for pedestrians to climb over. Here, a flurry of speculation is going on, with the difference that prices are lower here. For this is not a business section, but is being held for private residences, cottages, and small houses. Leveling off mountains and casting the debris into the sea is becoming less and less costly in such projects. However, under the skillful handling of the Americans. In the last few days, I have come across an excellent instance of this on a street running into Montgomery, which will be the main artery of San Francisco for some time to come, which had been blocked by a series of shifting sand dunes, varying in height from 10 to 20 meters. These had caused building activities to shift over to a location about 100 meters south of Sacramento Street, where my little store stood. Recently, a steamer brought in a gigantic shovel with an enormous capacity of sand per minute, and, in less than a month, a street 15 meters wide coming into Market Street, which runs up from the bay, was built with a quantity of transported material. If this goes on, in a few years there will be double the number of building sites along the bay. Hillsides will be excavated, and the seemingly impossible accomplished, which will make the value of these lands increase 10 times over. Since March 1st, I have been renting a room near the site of my store. Here we are now living while I make final preparations and lay in supplies prior to leaving for the placers. We are selling out at any figure whatever we cannot or do not wish to keep permanently. In the meanwhile, Pidocet has been building a little boat capable of navigating the rivers, provided there are any rivers in the bay for which we are heading. One of my little hobbies is a longing to be captain of something, if only of a nutshell. An alienist would diagnose my case and probably cure me of this maritime folly by making me swallow a large quantity of seawater. But as yet we have no specialists out here, and so my malady runs its course. I am writing this on March 19th in my room at 3:30 in the afternoon, sitting, or rather doubled up, on my mattress, which serves as a sofa. An old box acts as table. Naudet and Véron, one on my right and the other on the left, are each making a tent out of the bedding in imitation of the way we shall pitch our tents out at the placers, probably those on the Trinity River. These lie about 60 leagues north of the coast, on a bay bearing the same name. This entire region is reputed to be rich in gold and is virtually virgin country. It is inhabited by some inferior savages given to plundering and petty thievery. It has at last been decided that Véron, Pidoucet, and I, as well as Naudet, who asked to join us, are to go out and mine together. A few ships are already preparing to sail when they have adequate freight and passengers. But all this will take time, as no one as yet has any definite news about this unexplored region. Now and again in the gambling houses, we run across a certain person who is known as the Count of Campora and who claims to have been a lieutenant in the 4th Hussars. With him is a young girl or woman, whom he introduces as the Countess of Campora. To judge by her charms, her conversation, her occupation, she is a croupier in the gambling dens, and the anecdotes circulating about her, she is far from being a countess. But she is generally accepted as the Countess, and is known as La Campora. She is said to come from Chambray, where she was brought up in some obscure convent. If her appearance were more prepossessing, she could make a fortune. Her pseudo husband is most amicably doing nothing, and leading a carefree existence. Chambray is another gentleman who makes holes in the moon in anticipation of arriving there in the future. Captain Sutter, to whom we owe the discovery of gold in California, owns an immense stretch of land along the Sacramento River and its tributaries. He has brought his family over from Switzerland. The towns of Marysville and Eliza City, named for his daughters, are on his property. If he had more of the Yankee in him, he today would be one of the richest capitalists in the whole world. But unfortunately, much of the vast fortune that seemed to turn his head got away from him. His followers have tricked, deceived, and plundered him. Taking advantage of his weakness for drink, they have persuaded him into making transactions involving land concessions, which contain clauses so cunningly worded that they have brought on ruinous and endless litigation. According to local opinion, within a few years, he will be completely ruined by those whom he formerly aided. The United States government owes to him much of the recent prosperity of California, the new star that will soon appear on the American flag. Yet it is disputing his titles of ownership and is trying to get away his lands. In this war of avarice, which is being staged at local courts, with the ultimate conflict to be held at Washington, the captain is waging a fight single-handed. To try and save some of his properties not in litigation, he is obliged to sell or hypothecate other properties. Thanks to the moneylenders, the lawyers, the businessmen, the judges, and all the vultures who surround him and fight for his fortune, it runs the grave risk of soon being dissipated. I had thought of arranging for an interview with him to ask him for a concession in case I was unsuccessful at the placers. But after I heard about his embarrassing situation and his following, I gave up the idea. Mr. de Lambertia, a resident of Angoumois, has arrived here with de Gaulne on the Succès, with a shipment of wares. Unfortunately, shippers seem to imagine that the climate of San Francisco is like that of Provence and have shipped out an avalanche of summer garments that have no market. Even at the mines, where the heat is intense during the summer season, trousers and a woolen shirt constitute the typical miner's costume. Here, the weather, while never actually cold, is crisp all year around, and those who are used to it do not even wear overcoats. Mr. de Lamberty seems to be a sensible and well-educated man. These many new arrivals in this country give the impression of a kind of crusade into the Holy Land, present-day California. Faith is love of wealth, and the sepulchre is the mountain that holds the native gold in gigantic blocks, so now in the hands of infidel Indians. In the past, as in the present, the mass of crosses might well be the graves of all classes of society. Man, as a general thing, does not leave hearth and family to seek adventures in foreign lands unless consumed by ambition, love of gold, science, or religious ardor, or unless he has some duty to fulfill, some disaster to repair, some fault to forget, some sin to hide, or perhaps some rope to evade. On April 1st, I received a bundle of letters from France. Among them was one from Adelstan, written at Lasne, and one from the family at Passavant, together with a dozen packages of papers on which the postage must have come to at least $2. How was it that the letters I sent should have cost nearly 30 francs in addition to what I paid out at this end? Your letters were slow getting out to me. The postmark showed they were mailed last December and January. My mind is already made up. In a few days we are going to start for the placers of Trinity River. I do not know how far they are from San Francisco. Some say 100 leagues, others 150, but they cannot be far from the Oregon frontier. Ships are leaving every day for this country. It is all the rage at the present. The government has sworn in 100 men at $10 a day to keep off the Indians, scant protection against several thousand savages for the hundreds of camps situated along a stretch of at least 50 leagues. Today we gave notice to Mr. Ward, from whom we rented a room for a month at 1½ times the usual rate, that we were going to leave, and now we are living in a tent until time to start for the placers. Even now it is so warm that I have retired to the office of de France, which fortunately costs him nothing, to write this. He already owes rents to Mr. Chauvetot, which he has promised to pay when he has funds. But as he will never have any, this proprietor will probably have to wait with the others. Much to my surprise, this rascal was not malicious and cruel to the curé. I wish you could have seen what I saw today at the offices of Green and Hodden, San Francisco businessmen, and jokingly called a California vegetable, a gold nugget found in the Sonora placers weighing 22 pounds and 2 ounces. It was purchased for $10,000. Out here, at least, they lose no time. Fitzgerald, a passenger on the Ceres, who took valet and Dr. Dang to the mines located on the South Fork of the Yuba River, got back today, and when I ran across him on the streets, he told me he had seen a mule loaded with 200 pounds of gold that a single individual had taken out in a few months. I am surprised all heads are not turned at such amazing opportunities. True, this is exceptional, and in addition to this fortunate miner, Fitzgerald, there are many others less robust, less lucky, and less energetic, whose day's work runs from 1 ounce all the way down to nothing. In the majority of the placers, the daily profits of a miner are computed to be from $4 to $5. A tragedy that has just happened in one of the most influential American families in San Francisco has cast a pall over the entire city. I heard the details from the curé on whom Oscar de Gaulle and I were calling. Several years ago, Frank Ward, a member of the Ward family of New York consisting of three brothers, Frank, James, whose room I rented, and Charles, fell in love with a rich New Yorker, whom he could not marry because of the difference in their standing. Disheartened, deeply in love, and full of ambition and courage, he left for Mazatlan, Mexico, with his two brothers. There he established a banking house which prospered from the day gold was discovered in San Francisco. Chartering a ship, they came up the coast and landed in San Francisco with a load of provisions and a supply of currency at the most opportune moment. Speculating in lands toward the end of 1849, the three brothers found they had amassed a fortune of several $100,000. Frank then returned to New York and offered the young lady his heart and fortune. This time, both were accepted. Not long after the marriage was celebrated, the happy couple came to San Francisco. Within 2 months, the young bride died, leaving the husband inconsolable. 3 months after this tragedy, land values began to drop, and Frank suffered severe losses. In a moment of discouragement, he shot himself in the head. The doctors say he may recover, but even so, he will lose an eye and be permanently disfigured. Feeling over this grave tragedy has run high, particularly as there have been few deaths in the American colony. In most instances, a death or complete ruin would not ruffle them. They would simply go out faster than ever after another fortune and another woman. My friendship with Abbé Dubé has been kept up as much through sympathy for him as for self-protection. He has merchandise of mine worth $90, which he hopes to pay for when I return from the placers. In selling goods off hurriedly, it is necessary to run some risks. What he has are mainly images, crosses, rosaries, medals, tacks, nails, and bedding. I also got him some workmen to help build his San Rafael parish. He is so intelligent I cannot help but believe he is honest, that he will succeed, and that I will be paid off. Otherwise, this merchandise will be a dead loss, for it has no market out here, and will have to share the fate of the rest. Before he left to build up a parish and a following, I invited him to breakfast. I do not expect to see him again for another 6 months when I go to collect for my trinkets. Every day I meet some new refugees, stranded out here in California. Today I met a Mr. de Humphrey, a gentlemanly Englishman. Misfortune seems to breed confidence. At a first meeting and upon the slightest acquaintance, you will be told an entire life history, true or false, and why France was left. Usually the sons of good families, men who have been more or less well brought up and educated, feel they must justify their presence out in a country which is the refuge of filibusters, outcasts, and scoundrels of all nations. Though natural enough, this is utterly useless, for troubles too frequently fall on indifferent or even incredulous ears. An outstanding fact about all these emigrants is that while they leave their country regretfully and affectionately, yet they always bring their conceit with them. All this is ably confirmed by the following story of a merchant out here who, in 1838, left home. He did not say whether it was due to politics, passions, or financial troubles, and went out to Egypt at the head of a party of Maronites and made war against the Pasha. For his courage and services rendered in this insurrection, he received from the local government the title of Emir, and in 1840 was employed by the Sultan against the Egyptian Pasha. But subsequent treaties wrecked his career, which, if not bereft of danger, at least had its picturesque angle, stimulating his ambitions and satisfying his longing for activity. He returned to France where, up to 1849, he lived an obscure existence which he never mentions. Toward the end of that year, he came to California with a capital of some $2,000. He tried his hand at everything. At the placers, his mining was a failure. Out there he fell ill and, having exhausted his capital, returned to San Francisco, broken in mind and body. He is now leaving for the Hawaiian Islands, where he hopes to develop and plant some acreage for the ruler of Hawaii. And instead of being a mere, he plans to become a gardener. This same Mr. de Humphrey, who is quite distinguished looking, must have had great sorrow in his lifetime to judge by his slow steps, his bent figure, and his face which bears the marks of sorrow and disappointment more than age. He has an air of resignation about him, much like that of a man who is about to put his last penny and his last drop of blood on the red or the black. May the wheel of fate be propitious, for his appearance and his voice arouse sympathy in me which I cannot evade. Quite the opposite feelings were inspired by the tales of Mr. de la Molière of the Ceres. He must lack judgment, or be devoid of common sense to discuss his past as naively as he did with me recently when he told me he came to California because his father was in love with his mistress and that he had been forced to leave the paternal roof. A quarrel having come up between him and his father, the result is that he is going to lose the major portion of the paternal heritage which he had counted on to make up the losses he had suffered in some agricultural venture. This fact is not in itself surprising, but what does astonish me is that he tells a stranger about it. Our own dailies are full of worse scandals than this, yet details are not known to the public. It is considered cowardly to air family skeletons, particularly for a son to accuse his father and discuss his private affairs with a stranger except under extenuating circumstances, even if Lamolaire Sr. is brutal, bitter, bestial, and careless of his words and deeds. I predict that the young man cannot carry on a successful business out here. Our consul, Mr. Guy, has neither the funds, time, nor character honorably to hold the position he is occupying. The customs have seized goods of his valued at 300,000 francs, so it is rumored, and are keeping 1/3 of it. Another third has been broken or damaged, while the remaining third, though saleable, is of little value owing to the fact that business is dull and so many large shipments of foreign merchandise have come over. As he must keep up his position and needs from $30 to $40 a day for running expenses, his salary is hardly adequate. For this reason, he has had to raise money from outside sources. It is now said that he is ruined and that he leaves on the next steamer for Panama, both to get away from a disastrous bankruptcy and an onerous consulship. Before we start off for the mines, we shall have a chance to participate in one of the municipal election battles and see how officials are elected. For the past few days, the city has been in an uproar with mass meetings, public speeches for and against candidates, where there is tremendous applause or long drawn-out hissing, and processions flying banners bearing the names of the favorites. The day after, there is equal enthusiasm for opposing candidates, and, as the mob is made up largely of paid and half-drunk supernumeraries, many of them cheer the candidate of both parties. You might think these drunken, inflamed crowds parading, carousing, quarreling, eating, and drinking night and day were either inseparable friends or irreconcilable enemies. Such is not the case. They were merely being paid to walk, shout, and get drunk, and so they paraded, shouted, drank, and jostled the crowds. But after this was conscientiously done, the election over, their wages paid, and the wine put away, the city resumed its calm, and everyone went about his own business. The opposing factions in the city extended the olive branch, while promising to repeat the semi-comedy at the next elections. However, by that time, popular opinion respecting the candidates will no doubt have shifted, and the hero of tomorrow may perhaps be the very one who lost heavily at today's elections. My party is finally ready. Our location has been selected as well as the ship on which we have booked passage. We are going to the Trinity River on the ship Hector of 150 tons, owned by Sullivan and Booth. I have guaranteed to furnish the passengers. 5 of us are starting off together, our one idea being mutual aid and cooperation in working the placers if it seems expedient. These arrangements were made largely for Naudet, who wishes to join Véron, Pidosset, and me. Whatever motives I might have for leaving these fellow passengers from the Ceres, I shall never abandon the last 2 members despite the erratic character of my cousin and the inherent worthlessness of my workmen. Having laid in our slim supplies of provisions, tools, ammunition, arms, camping equipment, a boat worth about $250, and the sum of 1,000 francs, which we are taking along for emergencies, we are now ready. In addition, we have some $280 worth of merchandise left, which could be cashed in for at least $150, and 2 lots of nominal value. After talking with de Gaulnay, I gave in to his keeping our surplus funds and our valuables. I also gave him the right to take in any goods that might arrive while I am away at the mines on this one condition, that on any funds he is obliged to advance me on short time. Commensurate interest will be paid for the time the money is in transit, at the rate of 6% a month. As a rule, the current rate is 10% a month, with a security of buildings or merchandise. So I think I have made an excellent and far-sighted as well as a safe arrangement, for it is well known that de Gaulnay and Mr. Chauvetot are about to form an association. I am leaving for an indefinite period in which many things may happen, and as I may never return alive from this wild and savage country, I thought it best to give you some addresses in San Francisco where you could write in case of emergency and get some trace of me. They are as follows: the Consulate, the firm of de Gaulnay and Chauvetot, Pioche and Bayerque, Mulot and Callot, Beausange and Colliard, and Gardet at San Francisco. The Hector sails tomorrow morning. Adolphe de Finance is preparing to come overland in a short time and join us. He is detained here for the present. This will be a hard trip for him, with no roads and guides and over an unknown country. I offered to advance him the price of his ticket on the Hector, but he is so diffident that he will not accept. So far, dear Cousin Charles, I have given only a brief sketch of the more superficial aspects of this future Queen of the Pacific during the winter of 1850, when she was making her bow to the world. I cannot say whether my sketch is an absolutely true one, but if the original is not flattering, do not blame me, for this is exactly the way she appeared to me from my particular point of vantage. But in all fairness, I must praise, in concluding, the saner side of this young and eccentric city. Some Jesuit fathers who came out here in 1848 conceived the idea of building a Catholic church, as the population, already large, had no suitable place of worship. As lands were high, wages out of sight, and money scarce, as soon as they arrived, they started a subscription list, which met with unexpected success. Among the subscribers, the Protestants contributed $1,000. Where, in old world annals, could you find a similar instance of religious tolerance? With this pertinent question, and with my own personal admiration for this new city, I must bring to a close this 4th chapter of my adventures. I am beginning to feel the need of coming into closer contact with nature to heal my wounds, born of the trials and tribulations which have beset me since the day I landed in San Francisco, and I hope to acquire fresh strength by coming into contact with Mother Nature in her most primitive state. To study the Indians who are our closest representatives of prehistoric man, and above all else, to search for and find some gold nuggets